Hello and welcome to Study History of Mr. P and my topic revision video about resistance to William I, where I'm going to focus on the rebellions that he faced. I'm going to cover the Revolt of Edwin and Walker of 1068-9, the rebellions in the north of 1069, the Revolt of Hereward the Wake and rebellion to Ely in 1070-71, and the Revolt of the Elves of 1075. So first up, the Revolt of Edwin and Walker. Now this had a number of causes, including resentment by both Edwin and Morcar. Edwin's resentment was born out of the fact that William had promised Edwin he could marry his daughter and went back on his word, and also made his earldom smaller and less important. A similar thing happened to Morcar in terms of his earldom becoming less important. So, for example, the northern part of it went to Tostig's old Thane, for example. Castles were also another cause of the revolt of Edwin and Morcar. They were resented wherever they appeared as a symbol of Norman power, and this stirred up Anglo-Saxons and others. Taxes were also another reason for the revolt of Edwin and Morcar, particularly William's heavy gold tax of December 1066. And lastly, also next up as well, bad government on the part of Odo of Bayeux and William Fitzosbern, who, when they acted as regents for William, reportedly seized land from Anglo-Saxons unlawfully and also allows their soldiers to rape Anglo-Saxons. And lastly, loss of lands in general. So not only Edwin and Morcar, but many other Anglo-Saxons lost their land, particularly in the land grabs by Odo and Fitzosbern, because William's followers were seeking to expand their land as much as possible. Next up, we have the revolts of 1069 to 1071. Firstly, the revolts led by Edgar and the rebellions in the north. Now, this was a threat to William because it involved a combination of forces. So, rebels from Northumbria joined force with Edgar, who in himself was backed by King Malcolm III of Scotland. King Sweyn of Denmark also sent a fleet of ships to team up with the rebels. Now, this had been coming for a while. So, first up was the death of Robert Comyn, the new Earl of North Northumbria, who was killed after causing great resentment in the Anglo-Saxons in the north. There was an uprising in York. There was also an Anglo-Danish attack then on York, and rebellions also around England. But after the initial rebellions, the rebel groups separated, and this was perhaps their downfall, because William's response was twofold. First of all, the Danes who joined in the rebellion were paid off and left. And secondly, William embarked upon the harrying of the north, this vicious destruction of the north of England, because the rebels wouldn't meet him in open battle, and led for a generation the land being unfarmable. There was also the revolt of Hereward the Wake and the rebellion at Ely. This was led by a former Thane, Hereward the Wake, who was joined by the Gaines again, and who were led by King Sweyn, who must have thought there was a good chance of success if he came over to join the rebellion, and also Morcar joined in another rebellion. So Hereward fought a guerrilla-style warfare against the Normans. The Danes, however, along with Hereward, raided Peterborough Abbey, but then the Danes took the treasure and left, leaving Hereward and his supporters alone. The Normans captured the Isle of Ely and Morcar. Hereward escaped, though, and was never heard of again. But this event marked the end of large-scale Anglo-Saxon-led rebellions and showed that William's brutal tactics had been successful. So why had all these rebellions failed? Well, there's a number of reasons why they had failed. Firstly, there was no strong alternative as an English king. The leadership of the rebellions was often poor. They may have been united in wanting to rebel, but they weren't always united in their aims of rebellion. And because they weren't coordinated, they therefore lacked overall support. The Danes helped out at each of these rebellions, but they had their own motives and plans, quite often ended up being plundering treasure and going off back home. And William's own leadership and actions allowed him to be successful against the rebels. Last up, we get the Revolt of the Earls in 1075. Now, this had a number of causes and effects, and I'm going to talk you through the causes, key features, and effects of this rebellion. So it was caused by a number of factors. First of all, the loss of power. The Earls used to control the Marcher earldoms, but William had sent his own sheriffs to control the land, taking away some of their power. This connects to loss of lands because Roger de Breitel was not happy that he had control over less land than his late father had done, and the same for William, but also reduced the lands when Fitzosbern died. This also connects to a loss of privileges. Many of the Earls resented their loss in privileges that had previously been granted to them. And also the revolt took place in William's absence, so the revolt was timed perfectly when William was in Normandy and had left England in the hands of Archbishop Lanfranc. The rebels had powerful allies. Ralph de Gaulle was married to the sister of Roger de Breteuil. Ralph had contact with the Danes and support from Brittany and France, who also wanted to weaken Norman power there. And finally, Anglo-Saxon rebelliousness itself was a cause. So Wartoft, the only Anglo-Saxon leader of the rebellion, had been part of other rebellions in 1065 and 1069, and he was also the last surviving Anglo-Saxon Earl. So this leads to the key event of the rebellion. So first of all, before the rebellion even really kicked off, Wartoft decided to inform Archbishop Lanfranc of the plans. Lanfranc then sent men to the rebel earldoms to see what was happening and saw the forces gathering. There was also not enough Anglo-Saxon support for this rebellion, and the Danish fleet that had been promised arrived too late. And in fact, this is perhaps one of the main reasons, but certainly not the main reason why the rebellion fails. William does return to England during the rebellion, and when the Danes arrive with a fleet of 200 ships at the same time, the fleet, realising that William had returned, just simply sacked York, sailed up the coast and went home again. Now Lanfranc, for his part, leading the country at the time in William's absence, had written to Roger to try and convince him not to take part in the rebellion, and when this did not work, he excommunicated him. So this led to a number of outcomes. First of all, Ralph's rebellious followers were either blinded or banished. William then imprisoned Roger de Breteuil for life. Ralph himself escaped back to Brittany, but his wife Emma was kept in Norwich Castle until she could make a safe deal for passage back to Brittany. William, as I said, had travelled back to Normandy and attacked Ralph's castle, but William did lose his battle and was forced to retreat. Wartoft himself fled abroad, and then William tricked him into thinking he would be forgiven if he came back and submitted. And when he did return, Wartoft was put in prison and was later executed in May 1076. So, to recap this, some quick questions about this. So how was this revolt of 1075 different from the rebellions of 1068 to 1071? Well, it included Normans rebelling against William for the first time and Anglo-Saxons now defending their king. So the revolt of 1075 is sometimes known as the revolt of the Norman Elves or the revolt of the Earls. Why can this be a problem? Well, the revolt was more complex than this, so a Saxon Earl was also involved. Who was the rebellion's leader? Well, it was ultimately led by Ralph de Gaulle. The Earls that plotted with him were Roger de Breteuil and Wartoft. What was the conspirators' plan? Well, they planned to divide the Kingdom of England between the three of them. So which groups helped and supported the conspirators? Well, Danes and also rivals to Normandy from Brittany and from France. So you may wish to pause here and note down these answers because I know I've rattled through the questions really quick. And then last up, this last part of the presentation looks at the threats that were posed to William as king, how William dealt with each threat and what the outcome was. So first of all, dealing with Danish invasion, William paid the Danes to go away, and in the case of the harrying of the north, embarked upon that as well, so that the Danes wouldn't invade the north because there'd be nothing for them to take. The outcome of this was that rebels were easier to deal with without Danish support. In terms of the threat from the guerrilla warfare from rebels who avoided open battle, well, William was involved in rapid responses to outbreaks of rebellion. He also used his trusted followers to keep areas under control, while he led larger forces to deal with serious unrest. Troops searched out rebel hideouts, and castles were used to re-employ control. The harrying of the north also made areas uninhabitable for rebels and for everyone else. The outcome of this was that the experience of stamping out rebellions made William decide that the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy needed to be removed from power, and this was a permanent solution to prevent more rebellion. Another factor was discontent from troops and followers of his own. So William's knights and his mercenary soldiers complained about the constant marching, especially in winter, but William's strong leadership got them through, together with, of course, the promise of more rewards. But the outcome of these more rewards was that more land was taken from Anglo-Saxons, money for his troops came from taxes, and was also taken from the church. There was also the threat of the belief that Edgar was the real King of England, because he had a stronger claim to the throne. To meet this threat, William carried out royal ceremonies so that people could see him as the king. For example, he left York after the first uprising so he could celebrate Easter at Winchester, the old capital of England. And many English people, as an outcome of this, followed William against the rebels, and William's armies were levied from English shires, and some thanes defended the towns against rebels. So I hope you found this revision video very useful, and it might be well worth your while going back through and pausing at different points to read the information that I've outlined to you.